To this class lecture on early church and culture. As we are studying the subject gospel and culture, today we have lecture number 8. We go back to the early church's understanding, and also we just look back to a historical perspective, the history of the church and the culture. Of course, we are not going to see like a church history review, but we glance through bits and pieces here and there, and we try to understand the dynamics of faith and culture. The dynamic Christian faith, how they try to understand the culture from the early churches. Uh, when we go back to the history of the church, particularly early churches' understanding of the culture, here I need to mention a particular phrase. They always looked at aliens and strangers. The early church was very much cautious of imminent return of Christ. And there was persecution around, and there was rejection, and there was a heavy persecution, particularly in first century. The Roman persecution was so severe. During that time, yesterday also I mentioned people like Augustine, and they have written a city of God. People were looking at the other city. So they were able to comfort themselves by looking at the other world. So they were very much focused on life on earth is just aliens and strangers. We're just strangers here looking some other city. So they comforted themselves. So the early church used the terms aliens, paroikoi, and strangers, peripidimoi, the Greek words, means to describe its relationship to the wider culture. Because even the early church, they were in a context, and they were in a cultural context, particularly Asian Near Eastern cultures. The early church evolved from Judaistic cultural context, but they had to welcome people from Greek and Roman culture, Greek culture, and the church had to face a lot of challenges. So the church, to describe its relationship to the wider culture, they always looked themselves as aliens and strangers. As a result, they have not really given attention to the cultures around them. Particularly 1 Peter 2:11-12, if you read, dear friends, I urge you as aliens and strangers in the world to abstain from sinful desires which war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Now, particularly the last phrase, the day he visits us. They were very much cautious of the imminent return of Christ. So they focused on themselves as aliens and strangers. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. They are looking of a country of their own. So the country they were was not their own. Even now, we look at these verses and say, I am in a city, Hyderabad. This is not my own. My city is there, the eternal city. So the city of God. Augustine, when he has written the city of God. So they always looked at another city where they are traveling to. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. So as a result, what happened in the earlier days, their relationship with the culture was not so much important, and they have not given really attention to that. Their thinking was always on the other world. Even now, we have this understanding and they understood themselves to be different from the surrounding culture. Here it is a point. We have seen theoretical and theological. On the basis of that theoretical and theological position, now we are coming to the praxis of the early church. Even the early church, because of this theological standpoint, what is the theological standpoint? They understood themselves as the aliens and the strangers. As a result, their understanding of the culture has a different understanding. They understood themselves to be different from the surrounding culture. Yes, they are the followers of Christ. We are different. Our culture is the heavenly culture, and the surrounding cultures are different. So they developed a kind of the heavenly culture among themselves, a different culture, because of their understanding. They were shaped by an alternative story, the Bible story, the gospel story. Yes, there is a culture. We are surrounded by different cultures today. Even now, we have some relationship with those cultures. But at the same time, since we are aliens and strangers, we will be shaped by an alternative story. What is an alternative story? The Bible story, the gospel story. So that is the basis of our relationship, how we relate with the cultures. So their distinct communal life made them attractive to non-believers. There is a culture there, either you say it a heathen or a non-Judaistic or maybe a Roman culture or a Greek culture, maybe in ancient Near Eastern cultural stories and the relationships and their beliefs, eating habits, their way of dress and everything, a part of culture. But this particular believing community, the first century believing community, distinct communal life, their way of life, made them attractive to non-believers. I remember in my earlier days, as I was following as a child of God, there is a kind of, even in the college, university, yes, they are the believers, the believers community. Of course, this community is very much attractive, a part of that college, part of that celebrations. But again, when people look at this little group, believing group, they look at this group as a distinctive group, a group that is honest, faithful, and a group which has a values. That kind of distinctiveness they established with their identity. That's essential. That is important. Their distinct communal life made them attractive to non-believers. Here is a point. How we are going to interact with the cultures. People say reject, accept. That's not the issue. People should be attractive to the lifestyle because we are in a context and a culture. The first century community, the little community as disciples of the Lord Jesus, they attracted non-believers. Their witness was publicly revolutionary. Their witness was publicly revolutionary, irrespective of any culture around. And today we lost that revolutionary identity. So we are known for rejecting our cultures, rejecting people. But what is essential in our interaction with the culture, as we learned from the first century little group, their witness was publicly revolutionary because of the way they conduct themselves in a multicultural context. The Christian difference in First Peter, Miroslav Wolf was one of the prominent leader. He says it was rooted in an eschatological hope. As I have been talking about eschatological subject in a wider concept, yes, we need to have a strong relationship, a wider biblical hope, not fear. No, the subject eschatology should create and generate hope, not fear. But today, as we look at everywhere, people want to create a kind of tension, fear. Are you will you be raptured or left over? Check yourself. No, you kind of people wanted to create a pseudo fear in the people. No, eschatological theories or maybe those subjects, eschatological uh, biblical teachings should create hope in people. It was rooted in an eschatological hope. Their cultural values have been rooted in eschatological hope. First, again, First Peter 1, 3 to 4. He has given us a new birth into a living hope, an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you. Wow, what an amazing. It's not threatening. It's not creating fear and anxiety, but creating hope. So when we are interacting with cultures, with different cultures, so we need to create hope in others. He has given us a new birth into a living hope, an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you. It's not a hyper Calvinism as such. We discussed about Calvinism and Arminianism, but so he has given us a hope, a living hope. So Christian difference in first paper, as we continue to discuss these words, it was sustained by an ecclesiastical reality. Number one, it was rooted in eschatological hope. And number two, it was sustained by an ecclesiastical reality. Eschatological hope and ecclesiastical reality. What is ecclesiastical? Church. Ecclesia is the word, Greek word for church. The reality of the church. We should sustain by the reality of the church, church's interaction with the culture. But today it's not happening. Instead of sustaining, it's happening, we are ruined by an ecclesiastical reality. So the first Peter we see, it was sustained by an ecclesiastical reality. Verse 9, chapter 2, verse 9 in First Peter. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into this wonderful light. Look at here. You out of darkness into this wonderful light. Ecclesiastical reality. What is this ecclesiastical reality? The church is surrounded by different cultures, Greco-Roman cultures. The ecclesiastical reality is such that the church is surrounded by different cultures. The church is the lighthouse on the hill. You are called out of darkness into the church, into his wonderful light. So the church should display the glory and the light to the culture that there. Particularly in India, we are in a pluralistic context. Several cultures. The church in India should display light to those cultures. So when those cultural contexts and when those people in that culture, when they look at the church, they should wonder and they should get attracted. That's what happened in the first century Christians. They were not having so much strategy, all this kind of whatnot, what is that? Yesterday somebody is telling so many strategies. Even yesterday I forgot this. The associations and lot of this strategy, that strategy, this literature, that literature. No, they were just simple people who trusted God, interacted with the cultures, and they displayed God's glory, and they were called out of darkness into this wonderful light. As a result, what happened? People got attracted to the divine reality, the divine faith. So, number three, we have seen eschatological hope, ecclesiastical reality, and number three, it was defined positively rather than negatively. It was defined positively rather than negatively. When we are in a multicultural context, our little group should be positive rather than negatively. If we continue to be negative to the surrounding cultures and peoples, and we will never have any bridges, but only we will have walls, concrete walls. But the first century little group defined positively rather than negatively. So therefore, First Peter, first chapter, 13 to 15. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Be self-controlled. Set your hope fully on the grace to be given you when Jesus Christ is revealed. Be holy in all you do. Be holy in all you do. No, their focus was on themselves, not on the culture out there. But today, focus is not on the church and ourselves. Our focus is on the other side. You don't do that, don't do this, don't mingle with them. When they give you something, throw out, say no. No, you have this line, that line. No, the focus is when you teach people what is holiness, the inner holiness, the peripheral level of culture has nothing to do with your spirituality. Spirituality is higher than the cultural values out there, because the cultural values out there will be transformed by the inner and outer holiness. 2:21. Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. In his steps. So Christ followed. Christ was in a cultural context. The early little church, little community followed in his steps. Follow in his steps. Today, we forgot this reality of following in his steps, but we are following pastor's steps. My pastor told me to throw away this prasad. My pastor told me to remove this sticker. My pastor told me to remove this bangle. No, today, instead of having some kind of holiness, focusing on in his steps, following, that's a major stumbling block. We need to go back to the history, what the early church has done. I have given you an assignment when we were having the other biblical, I think, systematic theology. Do an exegetical study on book of the Romans chapter 15, where they struggle with the issue of culture. The early church, the little community, struggle with the cultural values, how we can draw a thick line, how far, how much. Even you can read it today. Go back to your table after the class, or maybe when you have free time, just do it again, a kind of personal Bible study. Acts chapter 15, whole chapter, look at the bigger context and the immediate context. Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. So this little community in the earlier church, and they said, abstain from sinful desires which war against your soul. Here is actually correct interpretation to the world. Yesterday, I think day before yesterday, I was talking about world, W-O-R-L-D, world. And today, the ignorant clergy look at those verses and say, we have nothing to do with the world. We have nothing to do with the world. How can you engage with the Hindu culture? How can you go for attend a marriage? How can you go and be a part of that burial ceremony, this and that? No, that's the world that in the Romans Paul talks about is here Peter interprets correctly, and Peter has given very good clarity of this. What is that world? It has something with the sinful desires which war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans. Yes, what among the pagans who have a different cultural context. The early church practice, as a result, they were like a lighthouse on the mountain. They could attract, and even though it was a small number, they could make a great impact in their societies. Today we lost that because we don't know how to relate with our cultures. We have strategies, we have books, we have so much literature, so much teaching. And by the way, 21st century now, 2000, I think 2019, in early 2018 onwards, all the dollars are funded only for training materials. Training. In the earlier days, only Haggai and Ravi Zacharias, a few fingertips. These organizations are given training. No, all of them are not on training. Only church growth, this growth, that growth. But the whole West fund giving agencies decided, let's stop giving funds for church planting and all. They stop. I know some of the associations. They said, let's give only for training. Let's not invest, because these mission leaders started building their kingdoms, huge palaces, their houses, their concubines' houses, and they stopped by knowing the truth, and they said, let's give only for training, because training means they have to spend the money. Now what happened? Now these evangelical crooks are very clever. You browse through any mission agency, 99.9 mission agencies, all of them are now only training. People are vexed with trainings now. So many trainings. Now online. The other day, a friend of mine calls me and tells, oh my God, people are really struggling to attend what? 24/7 on the online now. Even if the earlier days only they used to go to the church and come back. But now so many trainings. With a lot of money in trainings. They lost the art of early church interaction with the culture. And we are doing like a puppet show on online now today. So as a result, we are not really contributing to the culture around. The early church, it was lived with gentleness and respect. Gentleness and respect. Of course, I have attended AZIM, they call AZIM, but or ZIM we call it, whatever it may be, AZIM national seminars, and I have a really good association with they are very godly people, the hierarchy. But frankly speaking, with maybe it's my subjective opinion. I'm not making a generalized. It's my subjective opinion, my observation. Forgive me if I am wrong. They have produced arrogant puppets on the pulpits. People don't have a humility. On the pulpit, you see the preachings, kindling, kind of abusing the other cultures and other religions. They want to win the war, using all sorts of nonsense statements which are not really true. Some of them taking verses here and there and misinterpreting the Hindu text, and some of them are using their logic and philosophy just to assassinate the arguments of others. But where is the gentleness and respect? No, it was lived with. It was not. No, it's not preaching so much. In the earlier church, it was just lifestyle. The earlier group was lived with gentleness and respect in a multicultural context. What happened? The people around, they have looked at the gentleness and respect. What we need, human beings, we need respect. Even because it is man has been created in the image of God. Imago Dei. Whether he is rich or poor, whether he is an educated or uneducated, whether male or female, everybody needs respect. But I don't know, somehow Christian leaders, with all the apologetics, they have never learned how to respect the others. Gentleness, humility. No, with all the wisdom, having such great humility. No, the respect, going to the down, going to the least level, touching, that's what Jesus style. Jesus, the embodiment of God. He tied his towel, he lowered down himself, he knelt down in front of the disciples, and he washed the disciples' feet. But but the leaders never learned that. They do that kind of act in some kind of conferences here and there, like, to show up. It was lived with gentleness and respect. I'm talking in the context of cultural context. But we have only arrogant context to kindle other cultures. But in your heart, set about Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope you have. The reason for the hope you have. But do this with the gentleness and respect. A couple of months ago, I think 1 or 2 years ago, I carefully watched this. A Christian, I don't know whether he's a leader or a church pastor. I don't understand what to call him. In Hyderabad here only, he wrote a nasty book, kindling Hindus, picking up some verses here and there and published it. And some nominal Christians who never knew what is Hinduism, they were so happy that we have a great masterpiece. And they gave this fellow gave a challenge to all the Hindu gurus. No, Shankara, all the mattas, the gurus in different big institutions, big institutions, very big, prominent, big people have come. I think the TV channels have shown it. I have seen the arrogant nature of this man with a bunch of few people sitting on the panel. Maybe you should watch that video. The Hindu gurus, very top level gurus there. It's not easy for them to come. But they came, most of them, 6 or 7 of them. The way, the gentleness they were talking, it amazed me. But this fellow, other side, sitting and talking with a kind of arrogant nature. And when they're asking some questions, he said, they were asking, what is the basis for you to interpret that text? He said, no, I imagine this way. Your imagination cannot work in logic. Your imagination cannot kindle others. But do this with the gentleness and respect. So, and the next one, Christendom. We have looked at the early church, and now we progress to Christendom. Domestication. The alien status of Christianity changed in the 4th century when Constantine became a Christian and legalized the Christian religion. We have looked at the early church's interaction with the culture. From the early church, we looked at the Christendom. When we study church history, we look at it in a deep manner. The Christendom, when Constantine took over the nations, and when he became a Christian, whole nation became a Christian. The church and the state merged together. Christianity became a state religion. That's a Christendom. So Theodosius made Christianity the religion of the empire in 380, and the church grew 6-fold. Because everybody had to become a follower, a Christian, because of the Christendom. We see the model. It became an established church, domesticated by culture, and allied with the status quo. When it is an established institute, the church diluted its identity. Like, as we see, the first church, it was like a lighthouse on the mountain. And it now in this Christendom, domesticated by culture and allied with the status quo. It became a non-missionary church, preoccupied with its own welfare and maintenance. When it becomes an institution, it loses its sanctity and identity. It preoccupied with its own welfare, because when you have an institution, huge institution, you need money to run. You need a lot of systems, legality, and laws, rules, regulations, policies, with its own welfare and maintenance. So because of your policies, maintenance, you lose your identity, interaction with the culture around. It became a powerful and privileged church, made up of the educated, powerful, and rich. Educated, powerful, rich. The more, they know humility and respect. It became culturally active, but lost its counter-cultural status. It became culturally active, like today's church. It looks like active. Today we a lot of seminars on how to reach Hindus, how to reach Muslims. By the way, let me tell you, these all reaching Muslim just dollars, like a huge tree, like a rain from heaven. Even reaching Hindus, people use it. No, now the other day a friend of mine calls me and asked me to give a project. I said I don't want to do. I don't, because there's a lot of filthiness in it. He said, you are working for Hindus. There is a huge money for this. I know there is a huge money for that, but I don't want to bring the devil to my home, because I don't want to bring that curse on me and my generations. Lot of lies I have to write. I said, yes, I will write a project, whatever I want. So, no, if you write like that, they'll not approve. But he said, don't write your name. Why? He said, they know that you are very fundamental, adamant, so you will not take, because there is a policy. They will not directly give you. They will send somewhere, they will cut 20%. If they release a 10 lakh, that fellow will take 2 lakhs, and it goes to third person, he will take 2 lakhs. Into my hands only just a peanut will come. Then I need to ask questions. They will not tolerate that. He said, it should not be on your name, on even your wife's name, but somebody else should receive it. What a fun. This is a live example just a few weeks ago. It became culturally active. These fellows are very active, but lost its counter-cultural stance. How can we be a lighthouse on the mountain when we have all this kind of puppet shows in the name of mission? In the name of mission. Christendom. Today we have Christendom. Huge Christendom across the globe. It's just money, power, education. Most of my mission leaders, I tell you the truth, they are not really educated. They keep a doctor. 10 rupees doctor, 5 rupees doctor. Most of these theological fellows, they are 10th fail, 8th fail. They have nothing, they are good for nothing at home. Most of them, I tell you, names on the fingers in Indian top leaders. They go to a small Bible school, CTH, 1 year, and then they go to BTH, 3 years. And I never knew, when in my initial days, when people said BTH, I said, is it Bachelor Technology? No, it's a Bachelor Theology. Oh, Bachelor Theology, BTech, BTH. On that, they go to an MD, Masters in Divinity, and they go to America somewhere, do a kind of PhD. They go, I'm a doctor. Of course, they have polished English, cultured way of lifestyle, cars, banglas, strategies, because they're well educated now. They know all the Western theology. They come in an AC room, they derive strategies. They have a lot of money. They go around, conduct meetings and snatch people. They say, yeah, I give you 3,000, 2,000. Within no time, within 2 weeks, you can have 100 pastors with you. 2,000 churches you can start. This is what's going on in the market, mission market. It became culturally active, but lost its counter-cultural stance. This happened in the history. When the Christendom, it destroyed the early church's lighthouse on the mountain, and Christian values has come down. It's happening now. The church in modernity, pluralization in modernity, with the breakdown of Christendom and the down of the Enlightenment in 14, 15, 16 centuries, the established authority of the church was rejected, and Christianity was pushed to the margins of culture. Christianity was pushed to the margins of the culture, particularly Copernicus, when he brought his scientific discoveries, church could not tolerate. No, by the way, you can Google and read Inquisition by Roman Catholic Church. Inquisition. No, you will not believe what happened in the church. The way that the church persecuted people, the way the persecution happened in the church. Church in modernity, pluralization. The church was replaced at the center by a belief in the medieval and scientific reasoning. Medieval and scientific reason, because in the medieval and the scientific reason, in the both ways, human reason became prominent in that modernity. Human reason, disciplined by a scientific method, was seen as the only reliable avenue to truth. Authority and traditions were rejected because the church lost its identity and it was not really effective among the other cultures. And the church's authority and tradition were rejected because of the modern science and reason. Truth claims that could be validated by reason were accorded the high place of facts, and those that could not were placed in the optional category of values. Facts were important. The church in the modernity again. The claims of the gospel were relegated to the private and preferential realm of personal opinion and values. Preferential realm of personal opinion and values matter. The modern Christian church accepted its role in the private realm, operating alongside the powers of a scientifically established culture. As a chaplain to society, it took care of the religious needs of its members, but did not challenge it. Religious needs of its members. Even now today, we take care of the religious needs of the members. Church in modernity is a renewed mission. What is this renewed mission? As the modern view breaks down, the church faces an identity crisis. Breaks down, the church faces an identity crisis. So shifting sensibilities, less rational, more relational. And today, we need this. Less rational, more relational. When we interact with the cultures, of course, we need to use our ration, but many religious opinions, options of which it is least. A diminished role. This crisis actually presents an opportunity. What is this crisis? And today in this church in postmodernity, postmodernism is 21st century's a culture. What is the 21st postmodern culture is such that they look for subjectivity. You know, today people are not so much interested in objective values. They want what is right to you, what is right to me. They want shifting sensibilities. They don't want so much rational, more relational. That's the reason in this postmodern society, apologetics may not be really appreciated, may not be really the talk of the day. Maybe in the modern time, it was very much appreciated. People were there to discuss. But today, people don't have time. They don't want that. What works for me, that is important. Of course, we need it, but it's a less priority. You see any of these apologetics meetings, only the Christian gang, they sit. 99% only Christians. Only a few bunch of people, they sit and one or two, they go. And with those stories, people go out and say, shifting sensibilities, less rational, more relational. They want more relational. Many religious options of which it is least. A diminished role because so many options today. This crisis, what is this postmodern philosophical crisis, postmodern cultural crisis, presents an opportunity for us. How you may ask me, how can this an opportunity? Yes, it is an opportunity for us. Instead of arguing, instead of what is right, what is wrong, this right theology, wrong theology, it is all nonsense. What is right theology? Yes, there is a right theology. But no, when you say that you are right theology, that you are also having some wrong theology in that. That's what postmodernism says. Postmodern culture, what it is, you need to relate without diluting the theology. Yes, you need to have the right theology, but that right theology should be in a relational aspect. It should not build walls. This crisis actually presents an opportunity, but we are not looking at opportunities. We are creating walls again. I've seen there is this kind of group saying that everybody is wrong. Mine only right theology. We criticize everybody. The Pentecostals are wrong, the brothers are wrong, everybody is right. Then who is right? You don't believe in miracles. You are also wrong then. The church in the West has a chance to break out of its cultural captivity, regain its missionary self-consciousness. Missionary self-consciousness. Do you remember I've been telling about this great South African theologian, Paulo Freire. You can Google and find out him. Paulo Freire, South American theologian, not South Africa. South American theologian Paulo Freire, who has written a great masterpiece of the pedagogy of the oppressed. In that book, he developed conscientization. Of course, American pronunciation, conscientization. British pronunciation is conscientization. So the missionary self-consciousness and re-engage culture in a way that is both culturally productive and counterculture. Culturally productive and counterculture, both are important. These are the essential teachings from today's lecture, early church and culture. We have looked at early church's interaction with the culture, and we have looked at the medieval church, and then the postmodern church and postmodern interaction with the postmodern cultural context, where the present culture is postmodern culture, where the subjectivity is on the high. So let's continue to learn, and we come back to the lesson number 9, maybe after some time. Let's take a break here.